Good morning, Trumptopia. A special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. On today's segment, October surprise. Was that it? Or should we be bracing ourselves for more? Good morning, Trumptopia. It's Wednesday, October 7th, 7:47 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I am your ever humble, if only slightly eccentric host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Hell of a few days we've had. And so much to talk about. But I just want to ask the question again. Was that it? Was that the 2020 October surprise? Or should we be bracing ourselves for a roller coaster ride of more October surprises? Which way do you think Donald Trump will play it? If the last 48 hours are any indication, we might want to start strapping ourselves in real good and tight. For those who are not familiar, an October surprise, well, that's just sort of political lingo for any kind of or critical event, any form of, theoretically speaking, unexpected development that gets introduced in October, days away from Election Day. It's an unofficial sort of tradition. I don't know if anyone's done a serious historical breakdown as to when October surprise originated, but it's probably out there. Wikipedia probably has a page. Should I go looking it up right this hot second? I could. But I tend to feel that that's potentially boring for the audience while you wait for me to find out. We'll put a pin in that on the giant board of many pins and see if we can't come back to it. Hopefully in anticipation of the next October surprise. But I digress. Just as we eased into October and pumpkin spice began to erupt everywhere, I may comment with many people quite gleefully excited about it. And I could do a whole episode on pumpkin spice. Another time, another day, in another era, I might jump down that rabbit hole right now, but we'll set that aside too. Put a pin on the board for pumpkin spice and all my thoughts on that. I don't even know. Yeah, it had to have been on October 1st. I could look at a calendar if I kept my calendar up to date, but My wall calendar still has... Oh, that was a sad moment. My wall calendar still has May 2020 up. So that says volumes as to where I've been for the last 6 months. And now I'm afraid to tear it down. But I digress. As we eased into the first days of October, we were exposed, pardon the pun, to the shocking, not so shocking news that Donald Trump has tested positive for coronavirus. And it's been its own special little roller coaster. Please note how, in that time, since that disclosure, there's been much less discussion of the mounting financial scandals, potential problems that are developing and simmering away in the background for the great chosen orange one. And I was tempted to make, and I didn't give in to the urge because, I don't know, I can't make every meme that crosses my mind of making. I would just make memes forever and be a poor bastard of a meme maker. But you know how there's that those Forrest Gump ones? And I know Forrest Gump is its own special tinderbox of crazy things to discuss and analyze. And maybe I'll do a special movie, Mr. Zeppo's irrelevant movie reviews one day on it. But there's those memes, there's just what's his name's face and the statement, and then all of a sudden nobody was talking about insert your thing here. Or everybody forgot about insert your thing here. There's variations. I really was tempted to make one about the $421 million worth of mysterious debt. And the word mysterious is being gracious, in my opinion. I thought I'd just drop that there so that it's not forgotten. That isn't to say that I naively believe Joe Biden to be pure and innocent and virtuous. Nor do I blind rage absolutistly believe that all politicians are evil and corrupt. Now, are they in a breakneck race to prove me wrong? Yeah, probably. But that's a whole nother discussion. So, what gives? If that was the October surprise, what was the point exactly? There's so many questions in my mind about what has come forth. And I hesitated to just jump on the air and talk about them. First, because I was a little worried that he'd get really sick, really bad, really fast, right? God forbid. I would not wish any illness on my worst enemies because, you know, ego and all of that. Once you get into judging people and deciding who's worthy and not worthy and who you're going to be willing to inflict horrible pain and suffering on, are you any better than whoever the bad guys are? That's the catch, dear friends and listeners. That's the catch, right? That we just sort of steamroll right over in slow motion whenever we get caught up in vilifying others and in self-righteous, vengeance-oriented, hate. But I digress. So here we are. People are already voting, right? States open up. I think today is a big day for Arizona, if I remember correctly. But several states have been opening up as we've rolled into October, and that's always the case. There's no great mystery there. And leading up to the disclosure that he was sick with the hoax that he denounced as a hoax, leading up to that disclosure, it felt, or it appeared to be, Trump's primary push was undermining the election itself, right? Like, nobody was bad-mouthing the election and giving the people more reason to doubt it than himself. Just like that one study shows, and I'm sorry I don't have the source, but you can look it up. If you just Google Trump and majority misinformation, you'll probably find articles that'll link you to the study. But some study somewhere recently, and I'm sure it's dismissed as a political hit job by everybody in, all parties interested. But a study somewhere that claims to have independently, nonpartisanly, scientifically analyzed the root origins of popular misinformation, misconceptions, misleading statements and or content on social media, like a huge plurality, like a 40% or something, not a majority, but a huge plurality. I think it was like 38%. And don't try to like hang me on those numbers. Just go read the actual study. But an inordinately large percentage of this kind of content traces back to Donald Trump as president of the United States. There's a lot to be said there. And there's a lot that could be projected onto that. There's a lot that could be theoretically gleaned from it as a educated guess, etc., etc., etc. But his actions and his words, ranging from all the shenanigans involving the post office, and all the way to him telling / encouraging subtly / others might interpret it as giving overt instruction to his followers to vote twice in some states, which I believe is a federal offense, right? Like, fucking with your vote is a federal offense. That's why not a lot of people fuck with the vote. While, yes, there are obvious and weird occasional instances of voter fraud, see, both sides play in the direction they want. The left writes it off as if it were so insignificant as to be meaningless, which you can almost get there, right? But the right fearmongers it the opposite direction and makes it sound as though it were already at intolerable, inexcusable, unacceptable levels, which, I can kind of see the rationale. Also, but I digress. The curious fact that in the midst of Trump announcing that he's sick with the disease that he had at one point claimed was a hoax, and that he duplicitously for many months downplayed publicly while privately on tape to Mr. Woodward, sorry for the redundancy here, I'm sure you've heard, but acknowledged it as being more egregious, more of a danger, more of a problem than he pretends it to be publicly. In the midst of all that chaos, right, and his own duplicitousness of it and his own weird behavior, I think one of the most fascinating things that emerged, both sort of like, oh wow, I see it happening, and oh wow, they're talking about it rather quickly in the lamestream media. No offense. I for those of you who aren't aware of my nuanced position, I say hang in there. I talk about it in multiple episodes, but I reject any absolutist claims. That should be clear about my thinking, right? If there's a claim out there that's plausible but is anchored in some sort of absolute rationale about a category or an industry or a group of people, whether it's all Mexicans are lazy and rapists and whatever, a la what Donald Trump said, when he first announced, or all politicians are corrupt, or all journalists are enemies. I just don't buy into anything like that, good or bad, right? That kind of thinking doesn't make sense. But reeling it back to where we were, I was intrigued, not surprised, but also genuinely sort of in awe of how strong the response was in the midst of all of these shenanigans and going to the hospital and doing the drive-by waving appearance, that the echo chamber of echo chambers lit up with new, interesting, weird, but also sort of rehashed, a bit battered around the edges, sort of. It's been reused so many times it's ridiculous. I am reminded of that moment in the Hudsucker Proxy. If you've never seen the Hudsucker Proxy, honest, genuine, personal, real life, thumbs up endorsement. Like, watch that film. It's beautiful. But there's a bit, as they say in theater, there's a bit where the scene picks up a pair of narrators that are not narrators of the movie, but they sort of narrate the scene. And they also happen to be real life extra characters hanging about, populating this environment. We're in a diner. And they narrate the scene that's going on between the two primary actors, and they're kind of cynical in their commentary. And at one point, they criticize a choice made by the people they're observing, the main characters that they're observing and commenting on. And they agree that gag's got whiskers on it. That's how I felt as I was encountering, coming across some of the various conspiracy theories about Donald Trump and what the real significance behind his announcement, his trip to the military hospital, etc., etc. And for those who aren't aware, this show does not endorse or support any conspiracy theory content. This show and myself and all opinions expressed herein, which are mine, explicitly question conspiracy theory content respectfully, the way you might envision a philosopher respectfully questioning religious dogma. In other words, that's my attitude towards conspiracy theory content is, bless your heart, it's your free will to believe that, but what does it really say, and how does it add up, and can it jump through my bullshit tests? And to be fair, a lot of content does not clear my litmus tests. And some would say that I set that up in my mind in the way that I do because I'm somehow deeply indoctrinated by the system. My response, for those who are curious, is nobody escaped indoctrination. So if you're busy patting yourself on the back and pointing at other people, talking about how they're indoctrinated, odds are you got there because of indoctrination. And you're not actually doing anything but acting out indoctrinated behavior. No offense. And I'm not making any impossible claims about myself. And of course, I've addressed these questions in other episodes, so I just wanted to sort of skim that quickly. My history with conspiracy theory content goes back. I stumbled across and was quite fascinated by conspiracy theory content way back in ye olde ancient early days of the interwebs, back before the word social media even existed. Before Facebook, before YouTube, before MySpace, before 6 Degrees of Separation, a seminal and sort of foundational social media platform that wanted to charge way too much, which would nowadays seem reasonably competitive, should they also include streaming, I think. I don't think they did at the time. But I don't know if they survived or what happened, or if there's still a website out there, but it was really intriguingly, like the user interface was really well designed and intriguing. Intriguingly. I try to conjugate that. Intriguingly designed. But I digress. That's a meaningless statement. Where was I talking about? Oh, so I can reasonably say that I'm not a Johnny-come-lately, I just stumbled across the community in the last 3 years kind of guy, right? I was questioning the very popular back in those days on like message boards and in weird corners of the internet, which I couldn't prove to you nowadays because it's not like I screen captured everything like a paranoid futurist or anything. But, you know, you would find people discussing things or end up having conversations with people or read, you know, the precursors to blog posts in discussion boards, et cetera, et cetera. And lo and behold, believe it or not, people talked about these things in person with acquaintances and strangers. And I've gotten an earful on occasion from people I hardly knew. And while I don't pretend to have any conclusive conclusions, it is my humble opinion that wherever that root source is, and I'm sure there's plenty of independent conspiracy theorists that are just well trained nowadays, given the exponential growth and sort of common mainstream acceptance or inculcation. I love that word, although I don't know if I just used it right or not. The normalization of conspiracy theory-like material, memes, reposted supposedly personal statements from who knows who. You know, it's been, the whole conspiracy thing has adapted and thrived on social media, and it's been around longer than most people realize. And if you look beyond the internet and think in terms of people writing and publishing underground books, et cetera, there's been a conspiracy theory movement in America for a very long time. Arguably, maybe in much less overt, much less mainstream, much less normalized ways, much fringy ways. One could argue that there's been a movement for up to 60 years of people questioning, and at some point it might have been really earnest and legitimate. And I'm not trying to cast any aspersions, but I do throw the question out there for people who take their conspiracy theory content seriously, and especially for those who are relatively new to it. No offense, I'm not judging anybody who's only been, quote, going down the rabbit holes for a year or 3 or 5. But this shit ain't new. And forgive the pejorative there, I call everything shit, right? You know, religion, that shit ain't new. Christianity, most of that shit ain't new. They borrowed most of that shit. Recycled and reintegrated once they like erased all whatever the original spiritual practices to the point of them being unrecognizable. But that's a whole nother episode, right? I have addressed that before in the show, so if that interests you, scroll down the list, see if you bump into episodes with titles that indicate I might hit on the subject. Check them out. Where are we going with this? What do I think is going on? Let me zoom back. Let's zoom back a bit and do a little bit of that dare I suggest that I'm as clever as some of those other a-holes out there, insisting, no offense, but some of these guys get really abusive about it because they're riding so high and mighty about thinking that they're so correct. But let's apply some of that critical thinking that seems to get talked a lot about, but maybe not so often used. Trump's overall demeanor about the virus remains dismissive. We can rationalize that now all kinds of ways, and you can see the attempt to reshape the narrative happening in real time. Trump, although he has not made any appearances in the last 24 hours, I don't think, during, his maneuvers to the hospital and back, made a big deal about showing his face and showing himself as being strong and being capable of fighting the virus. And for whatever reason, we're being informed, we're being told that he's had a pretty easy time of it. Lucky him. Although, if we stop and think about that, if they're actually giving him what the official list of, medications and treatments that they're supposed to be giving him, that's an interesting list because, they're applying drugs that were intended, or that the current sort of consensus idea of how to use is targeted at different phases of the disease as we think we understand it. And he just did all three of them all in 3 days or 7 days or whatever it was. And I don't have the list of drugs in front of me, and I don't have the schedule, blah, blah, blah. And there's been obviously some murmurings from the left that we're not being well enough informed and that we might even be being misled. If we zoom back and really sort of unpack the trajectory of events, we have to question, how is it that the outsider, the man who claimed he alone can fix the problems that we're facing, the man who said all the quirky, crazy things, and we've already played them on the show, which that audio meme should live forever and should never be forgotten. In my humble opinion, it should now belong to public domain. Ranging from it's a hoax, it'll go away in April, it'll go away in the heat, it'll go away, etc., etc. And now maybe I'm immune, I don't know. His words, not mine. So, stepping back, what does it mean? What does it really mean that the person in America, in Trumptopia, that can be singularly credited with convincing a vast plurality of Trumptopians that the disease is either a hoax, a flat-out lie, or milder than the flu, something that only kills old people, etc., etc. All the bad information. What does it mean when that person he's not alone in this, right? Is it Bolsonaro, the guy from Brazil? And then what's his name over in the UK? The three of them, arguably, were the most dismissive of the disease over the last 100 years of this pandemic. Some days it feels like every week has been a year. Some days it feels like every day has been a year. But that's neither here nor there. What dots am I trying to connect? Well, we have this raging debate about whether or not coronavirus is real or some kind of hoax. And while the denier side does have the sort of, well, we're flexible enough to admit that there's some kind of disease going on, but then you just add all the misinformation, right? That it's less dangerous than the flu, that it's this or that, or that there's a lot of variations. And it can go on ad nauseum. And a lot of it, sort of like the flat earther stuff, when you're confronted with a wall of text, it can be overwhelming to the point of like, yeah, you know what? I don't even want to argue with that because I don't have a thing prepared. And that's how sometimes I think that's how people get won over. But I digress. Trump has categorically behaved like someone who either truly, genuinely believes that it's fake and that it's not going to endanger his life in any way, shape, or form, and that risk reduction measures are ridiculous. Or, now, it's very believable, it's very possible that he believes all those things, even in the face of the numbers, even in the face of all the evidence. And while, yes, there's flaws and corruption, and there's been, mysterious things and claims that have been inaccurate, I've always said incompetence and corruption are unfortunately all over that's the foundation of this. But setting that aside, the only other option to explain his actions, his words, his behavior is to describe him as someone who understands fully what he's doing and cares so little about anything else that he's almost kind of daring everyone to get sick and willing to risk his own base getting very sick in order to win political momentum and points and power. Is that far-fetched? Is that a left-wing conspiracy that I picked up from the media? I don't think so. I was thinking this long before he announced he was sick. But let me reel it back a little further and leave you with a thought. Would an actual outsider who was really trying to fight the system and who really thought that COVID was bullshit and he was right, and the disease really was a hoax, would he get sick? Probably not. So, what does that imply about Donald Trump getting sick? I don't know about you, and I've been trying to find the right way to word it. And that's why I get into these ruts where I'm like, I can't even go on the air because I know what I think, but I don't know how to get to that phrasing in terms of just talking about it. But in my humble opinion, and I understand that I could be wrong, the fact that he got sick and played along, right? I mean, either he got sick or he didn't. There's a lot. I made a meme the other day, and I don't remember if I've already quoted it, but did he just get sick with a hoax that he doesn't think is real, or is he faking his own COVID? So, this president of the United States getting sick and acknowledging it and not trying to cover it up, getting sick and seeming to want to capitalize on it, right? Like to rally his base. He certainly got a lot of empathy and sympathy out of being in the hospital. It was evident in the fact that crowds showed up just because there was an obvious setup, with the media and like that. This was the shared national, probably international shot. That might also be the only reasonable spot for supporters to gather. But it was certainly interesting watching all that develop. I can't help but remembering on the very first day when he was first being transported, there was like 3 people out there that were like really early in staking out that corner. And you could tell that they were there and that they were aware that they were on TV, and like they would wave every once in a while. A couple times, they stopped and waved and whatever, but they also sort of, one guy seemed to be on the phone. I don't know if he was just like organizing a group or what, but it was just intriguing and kind of funny. But sidebar, I was then not all that too surprised when a massive crowd turned out. But so I'm trying to like puzzle it all together. Here he is, he's sick, he's not being transparent about the details, and he's definitely the Lincoln Project nailed it. And I don't know where they found the singer so quick. And I wish I had it so I could just play this for you, but maybe I'll see if I'll post it on my Facebook, right? And then you can just listen to it, and then we can come back and talk about it. But somebody did a Don't Cry For Me Argentina parody song. I think it's Don't Cry For Me White House Staffers. And like the refrain, the infamous refrain, which I don't even remember the actual lyrics for, but it was like, I broke my promise. It was really well executed. It sounded lovely, and it was hilarious. And I was dying laughing. I think that was on some channel while I was downstairs making breakfast. So to wrap things up and sort of get to my point, this event has massive implications. Now, personally, I have been choosing to vote for, because I'm not a betting man, but I've been choosing to cosmically vote for an organic reality, that the disease is real, it's one of many actual diseases, and we've got to deal with it. And that this has developed as things do in nature, and it's obviously being capitalized on by that which one might call the system. And we can unpack and discuss all the different ways that the system is capitalizing on this disease. But let it not escape you, dear audience, that I am of the firm yet humble opinion that the system is capitalizing on a real disease by influencing everybody on all sides of all the arguments about the disease. So even if you're trying to do the right thing, you must remain vigilant and guard the garden of your mind. You must protect the garden of your mind. You must guard the entrance into your thinking, because there's manipulative content out there that's designed to target everybody's niche in the schism of schisms, if I can throw that out there. Okay, but in regards to the president, this guy has, through his own advertising and the elaborate like world building, mythos building of his base, because they've turned him into something that he's not. And that tends to happen with people who want to acquire power for power's sake. Power becomes the both the agent of attraction and sort of the primary focus of projection. He's created this mythology, this branding, that he's an outsider to the system, that he's not complicit with the corruption that everyone is rightfully upset with and fed up with, and therefore exclusively capable of doing something about it. Well, let the record show what he's done, and that he is complicit in the ways in which the system is capitalizing on COVID. Now, it doesn't turn out any better if we think about it the other way around, right? If it's all a hoax, then it proves that, what does it prove? That he's complicit with the hoax. But it's a James Bond-like undercover. That's PSYOP. That's echo chamber. So, like the aggrandizing of an individual to the status of demigod, where it doesn't matter how it turns out, he did the right thing. That's manipulative cognitive dissonance. That's manipulative psychological conditioning. I think. We should never hero worship anybody, in my humble opinion. Should we admire and look up to people? Absolutely. But it should be sane, and it should always take into account the full spectrum of that person's being, and and the context of everything that is being admired. So, I know that the base seems to be either concerned about his well-being and caught up in the awe and inspiration of the narrative that he is Superman at 78 and has somehow miraculously fought off this disease by his own sheer Trumpian willpower. Never mind that I know that this is a left-wing talking point, but it's also a fact. Not all left-wing talking points are false. Not all right-wing talking points are false. Right? The problem is that they all pretend in an exclusive fashion that about the other. That's what's the problem. Okay. So, and the talking point that I was about to launch on that I didn't want to just, I wanted a disclaimer. It's like, I get it. But as the president of the United States, not Donald Trump as Donald Trump, but Donald Trump as the president of the United States in that role, has had access to better health care than most taxpayers have access to. And he has access to it for free because of taxpayers paying their taxes. Something that he has controversially avoided doing for at least one decade, if not more. So maybe his bravado and his erratic actions has more to do with the drugs they're pumping him full of than his own innate, miraculously healing, golden chosen Jesus body. Because that guy ain't the golden chosen one. He's the orange deceiver. No offense to anybody out there clinging to Donald Trump as some sort of demigod. I can't buy into it. He would have healed, because we already did an episode about this, right? But to summarize that episode up right now and to add it to the point here, if he was some sort of chosen one, if he was some sort of, because people believe this, if he was some sort of reincarnation of Jesus or whoever, Saint Gibraltar, Saint Bernardine, there's a bunch of variations on this, I swear to you. And I know I just made up fake saint names, but there really are. Like, there's a group of people out there who very, very seriously tried to create a group, a community, rallying around the notion that Trump is Saint Bernard. That's the one. And or Jesus himself. If any of those were true, he would have cured the COVID in January and performed some sort of holy miracle, right? And if he were truly an outsider that believed the disease was a hoax, and it was really a hoax, he would have never gotten sick. So if the disease is a hoax, then he's a liar, which we know, independent of this, he is. But if the disease is real, then he's complicit. It's a lose-lose situation no matter what you think about Corona. And yet, the base is bending over backwards, running with some sort of he was personally involved with a top secret black bag operative, secret, what's the word I'm looking for? Military op, some sort of parapsychological military operation. And this is getting laughed at and mocked in the mainstream media, which of course the base responds, of course they're going to laugh at and dismiss it, mock it in the mainstream media. They're trying to protect and hide the fact, etc., etc. I cannot know. I don't know if you, dear listener, have some magic avenue to finally knowing. But the problem is the people who believe in this stuff, their sources always have sources that are bound up within their same sources. And no matter what any Q enthusiast has chosen to believe, Trump himself has acted like he has no idea, right? And I know that's part of the 7-dimensional reverse psychology backgammon chess that he's playing. But the irony, see, that's how PSYOP works. You take someone and you put them on a pedestal and you project and attribute a bunch of nonsense to them, which sometimes correlates to real world events. But that, realistically speaking, no one person could have actually individually have achieved, right? Like, just, it's incredulous. Am I wrong? I could be. I tell you what, though, if he did just do that, how come he's not bragging about that? Trump loves to brag. One of the critical flaws, in my humble opinion, behind all of this pro-Trump conspiracy theory, and there's, like I've said, there's tons of variations on it. But all of the ones where he's somehow secretly working through back channels to, like, if all of that were true, why isn't Hillary Clinton already in jail? Why has his statements not ever fully quite matched the conspiracy claims? And why, despite some small percentage of some of the supporting facts being verifiable, how come the main thrust of it all no one can verify? Except from within the echo chamber of claims made. And why does everyone always resort back to the same sort of constantly evolving, but constantly recycled talking points? Now, in terms of some of the not pro-Trump conspiracy theories, it's just adding more chaos to the treadmill of distraction and confusion and debate and arguing. As far as my show is concerned, though, I'm not here to try to prove or disprove, because I'm threading a finer needle than that, and I'm explaining my thoughts on how I think things work. And I'm not pretending to have any extra special sources, right? I would love for this show to get picked up and have resources and the power to send journalists and myself, right, to go talk to real people about these issues. So, having disclaimered that, I will leave you with this. For the COVID, the curiosity to me, the very interesting thing is that despite this new, not so surprising, because seriously, like I said before, he behaved like, I don't know, like that one guy in your group of friends that's gonna get a DUI because he keeps nodding and smiling and not giving a fuck and drinking and driving. No matter what you say, no matter how many times. And I hate that somebody's already made some somebody on some mainstream media has already written. I wasn't trying to plagiarize them or reference them, but somebody already made the analogy to drunk driving. And in their bold statement, he is the drunk driver, right? He is the drunk driver that refuses ever to stop. And that's a dangerous thing. And that's also a thing, that's like, it's a little sensitive, it's a little touchy, but there's a subculture in America, psychologically speaking, that isn't so much about alcohol, but about being that way, about no matter what the world around me presents, once I've chosen to be a certain way, I'm going to be a certain way. There's a sort of, I don't know, there's a culture of aggrandizing that, of making that character flaw into some sort of virtue. But I digress. We're not out of the woods yet, America, Trumptopia, because we really are truly sort of living two parallel worlds together here. And of course, there's a lot to talk about because we've got an election barreling, right at us, and a lot going on around it, and a lot going on around that. There's a lot I haven't touched on, many subjects out there worthy of discussion, and I'll be back, hopefully more often than I have these last 2 weeks. But as always, dear friends and listeners, I humbly thank you for tuning in and checking out this inconsistent podcast. And I invite your thoughts, reactions, questions, Jekylls and cheers. Hate speech will be censored, but acknowledged and giggled at. Until next time, I humbly encourage you to spend a little less time engaged in ideological debate and a little more time in some self-care and meditation, self-healing. And may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart. Good Morning Trumptopia is a special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. A special production of C-Tag Studios, Collaborative Theater Artists Group Studios, an imaginary production company I pretend to run in my mind. If you appreciate what this show talks about, please, by all means, recommend it to friends. And if you want to help this almost actually starving theater artist out, help get the word around, make your suggestions, recommendations, questions, comments, and contributions to the show, drop them at theincorrigiblemrzeppo@gmail.com. The website should be on the master profile on Sprecher.com. You can Google me. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, etc., etc. Don't forget, folks, 2 wings, 1 bird. I hate to shatter that illusion for you, but no matter how much they argue with one another, ultimately, all evidence indicates that both political parties driving the wedge issues ultimately collude with each other to get an undisclosed set of priorities achieved.